Here's what's on tap today from FinCon 2025 in Portland, Oregon. We'll talk pre-negotiated car leases sold online. We'll discuss everyday money heroes. We'll talk about what happens when you put yourself through financial hell to get to FIRE. And we'll talk about alternative assets in IRAs and retirement plans. All that, plus John Cole Scott from CEF Advisors talking closed-end funds in the Navigator.
Podcast time. We got the equipment and the perfect business plan.
Welcome to Money Life, which, with the exception of that John Cole Scott interview today, is completely from FinCon 2025 in Portland, Oregon. I will be heading home from the conference today. It wraps up and I'm not staying all the way to the end, but I still have great stuff for you, not just today, but on Monday's show. Monday's show will include several interviews that I will tell you about at the end of today's. But today, we've got a really good lineup. So we do start with the Navigator, which we have every Friday for you from the Active Investment Company Alliance, our partners in doing that. And John Cole Scott from CEF Advisors joins me. We've got an interesting one for you. But then we're off to FinCon, where Revi Wadden will talk about DriveMatch.com, his new fintech company, which matches investors with pre-negotiated car leases. Then financial educator Nick Johnson, who himself reached early retirement and aggressively early financial independence, retire early kind of retirement. He's trying to teach others how to generate generational wealth. And he's doing it through what he calls everyday money heroes. We'll talk with him about that effort. Then Gwen Mers Joyner, one of my favorite guests ever from FinCon, returns this year. She is known as the Fiery Millennial because she runs the Fiery Millennials blog, but she got to a point where she had achieved a lot of FIRE early. A lot of FIRE meaning she had a lot of retirement assets, but she was miserable. So she changed her mind about how she was living, started to spend more, but what she really got was choice. And you will not believe the choices she's at a point of making now as she looks at turning 35 and considering whether that will be her retirement age. All that, plus Adam Bergman from IRA Financial, which specializes in helping people put private equity, private credit, crypto, and things along those lines, including real estate and more, into IRAs. We're talking not just about that, but also about recent law changes that should make private assets more readily available in 401ks and other plans. It's a wide mix, and that's what you get at FinCon, where it's financial content creators, bloggers, and podcasters, and a lot of folks who support it. So I've been here not just doing the interviews, but trying to learn more to make us better at our jobs and what we're doing, try to maybe scare up some partnerships and people we want to be talking to and working with, and much, much more. And I'm excited with some of the prospects we've got, some of the things we think will happen moving forward. We hope that we'll have some news and other cool stuff that we can talk about soon. But right now, we've got a show with a lot of cool stuff. Let me know what you think. Chuck@moneylifeshow.com is how you reach me. But right now, settle back. I've told you what's coming. First, John Cole Scott, and then off to FinCon.
Exchange is more than a finance conference. It's a community. Join us to gain insights and connections that last. Visit exchangeetf.com.
We're talking with John Cole Scott of CEF Advisors about when it's right to make the leap into closed-end funds. Welcome to the Navigator. Yes, this is the Navigator, where we talk about all-weather active investing and plotting a course to financial success with the help of closed-end funds. The Navigator is brought to you by the Active Investment Company Alliance, which is a unique industry organization representing all facets of the closed-end fund business, from users and investors to fund sponsors and creators. If you're looking for excellence beyond indexing, the Navigator will point you in the right direction. And returning to the Navigator today, John Cole Scott. He's president of CEF Advisors, which is online at cefdata.com and which has redone their website, which you should check out if you're looking for information on closed-end funds, because all of their data is there. You can plug in any closed-end fund you want and get John's analysis and what the firm is looking at when they're sizing up that fund. But beyond CEF Advisors, John is the chairman of the Active Investment Company Alliance, which you can learn about at aicalliance.org. John Cole Scott, it's great to have you back on the Navigator.
Great to be here with you, Chuck.
Now, I'm going to point out that anybody who heard me say, oh, we're talking about when it's right to make the leap into closed end funds realizes that closed end funds is your backyard pool. And this is a place that you're going to dive into a lot. But when I talk with individual investors about doing the navigator, I hear a lot. Closed end funds, I don't understand them. I don't get the difference, etc. So we're going to look today at two situations. One, where you literally are deciding between a firm that offers the same assets in an ETF and in a closed end fund, and another where we're talking about a closed end fund of funds. We want to help people understand how we size it all up. Sound about right?
Absolutely correct.
Let's jump in first. And we're going to talk about two Eaton Vance funds. One is an ETF, ticker symbol EVLN, the Eaton Vance floating rate ETF. And we're comparing that with the Eaton Vance Senior Floating Rate Fund. That's a closed-end fund that trades under EFR. So both are buying floating rate securities. And for the general public, and we see this because of inflow numbers, they would say, oh, ETFs, they're simple, they're cheap. Let's go in that direction. But when you look at the two, same assets, very different results. Explain what it is that you see and why your choice might be the one that the general public doesn't make.
Sure, and absolutely. I mean, EFR is currently about an 8.8 indicated yield, and EVLN is about a 7.3. Not uncommon because, as you might suspect, EFR has leverage. But there's a current discount of EFR and relatively wide for its peer group at around 6%, versus effectively ETFs have no discounts in regular markets. And that leverage is like 36% versus obviously zero for the ETF. Now, as you would expect, the management fee on the closed-end fund, which is not the only expenses, but a good comparison, is about 1.13%, and it's 60 basis points, so roughly half for the ETF. The closed-end fund is 22 years old, and the ETF is less than 2 years old. And size-wise, closed-end fund is moderate at $350 million, and the ETF is at $1.4 billion as of this September. When we really dig into it, the things that we see that are attractive is the leverage adjusted NAV yield of the closed-end fund is about 6.1%, which is about 15% lower than what the equivalent yield would be for the ETF, which suggests to us that it's probably more likely to have a higher distribution upside in most market environments. But we did notice had some return of capital the last couple of years, but we also noticed in August they reduced the dividend a couple of percent. We feel aligning their current plan with current markets. And with that combination, this is the really fun or terrible closing fund thing. The dollar in your portfolio with discounts and leverage is about $1.45 of manager assets. The good there is you get more exposure per dollars. The bad is you could have that become more terrible if discounts widen or if leverage wasn't a great use at that moment of time.
What you're saying is that because of the leverage, because you are basically buying exposure to almost $1.50 of assets for every dollar you invest, you get a lot more action for your money. And that action, well, it can be a double-edged sword. But if you really believe in the assets, which is why you would be buying them regardless of how you're buying them, and you want the juice, you'd go with the closed-end fund. If you are more concerned about the volatility in that space, you might then go with the ETF, correct?
Correct. So right now that fund is trading the widest discount recently is about a 12 discount for the closed-end fund and a 3% premium. So it's 38% in its range. But if you think there's going to be a bumper bruise and discounts could blow out, you would not want to be in the closed-end fund. You'd want to live in that ETF and wait for a double-digit discount in this fund, like we talked about before, to rotate back into it if you're a more conservative, risk-thoughtful income investor.
Here we are waiting for the Fed to cut interest rates. When we see rate cuts, it will impact floating rate funds and senior floating rate debt. So would you be leaning towards the ETF or the closed-end fund if you're making that choice in this asset class now?
So two things, as you said on the front end, we're closed-end fund focused investors, and our client conversations talk about volatility being a benefit, not a risk. And so if there were an event that brought these discounts wider, we'd be actively rotating as we could inside of the different funds in that universe for most of our clients. Now, imagine there's a brand new client coming to the market right now for us. We might do a 2/3 closed-end fund, 1/3 ETF, could take some of the risk off the table. with a little bit of dry capital for deeper discounts, but still not avoiding the entire allocation. And that is one of the ways we find firms like ours have grown to use these funds as companions and not just pure rotations, is to size up the near-term risk based on entry point for a client.
And that's an important point because it doesn't have to be an either or choice. It's not binary. You must go with one or the other. For most people, the answer would be you could use both. You just need to understand that you're using one to give you a little bit more juice and the potential to get more squeeze out of it. You're using the other to make sure you've got that basic coverage of the asset class.
Absolutely. And if you don't know what's going to happen, it's good to kind of split the difference, especially since the last 5 or so years, commissions have gone to zero.
Well, now let's turn it from that situation to the RFMZ. That's River North's Flexible Municipal Income Fund 2. And that is a closed-end fund that invests in closed-end funds. And it's hard enough when you use a fund of funds in the traditional open-ended fund space, because then you've got what's happening with expense ratios and what have you. But when you add leverage into the picture, it makes things that much more wonky for somebody who's trying to evaluate what they are getting. So help us understand, when do you want to go with the closed-end fund of funds versus when do you just want to go, I'll put a few closed-end funds directly in my portfolio?
So I would say the more plain vanilla and the bulk of our muni assets are in those multitude of regular closed-end funds that you and I can buy for our portfolios, as any advisors can. However, when we feel like we have a stronger opinion of rates going down versus up, which is where we sit at my firm today, taking a closed-end fund of closed-end funds and layering in discounts on discounts, leverage on leverage, gives you more magnified exposure for a more convicted bet with less dollars utilized. It's a more complex analysis, but it definitely lets you, if that's your goal, and we've talked about this before, this is one of the funds that when the discount's wide and they're overweight muni closing funds with leverage at the fund level, leverage at the guts level, can be a very powerful outcome.
But don't you therefore also face that downside risk we were talking about earlier, where having done this, you are making the risk that much more intense? The rewards could be bigger, but so could the downside?
Absolutely. So if you do not have that belief, or if you are a more skittish investor, this would not be a good buy and hold current fund for you. And we think about the current 9 discount at the fund and about 42% leverage. First, at the wrapper level, 91 cents controlled that $1.42. There's a duration there, about 10, but they hedge it a bit, so it's down to 7 at the fund level. But then you dig in deeper. For the mid-year updates, they were 37% disclosed muni closed-end funds, and they disclose a weighted 7.5% discount for the holdings. And if we take our average leverage for the basket of funds we look at 35%, then this is like a 13 blended discount. And we combine all that math with a rough estimate, it's $1 in your portfolio will give you $1.81, which again tells you that's the upside bull case. But if it goes the other direction, that'll be the downside bear case.
Yeah. So you're getting good yield. You're getting the regular payouts that you want. You have the upside potential with a wide discount that can be narrowed, and you're getting really good literal bang for the buck. You're getting more ammunition for what you're paying, but you, again, it better be pretty certain that you love the asset class.
Absolutely. And I'd say that, obviously it's a higher beta version of the exposure. And also because many closed-end funds overpay, this one is not immune. We would recommend reinvesting a portion of it. We'd model roughly 15% back into something in your portfolio and not spend that in retirement.
And in this case as well, again, if somebody is looking at closed-end funds, on the one hand, you could say, I'll buy the closed-end fund or 2 closed-end funds in the muni space to kind of cover me. On the other hand, you could hire a professional manager. Does that factor into it? I mean, obviously, you are a professional manager for your clients, but for the person who's not using someone like you, does using the closed-end fund of funds give them a little bit more of a gain where they're getting the benefit of management that they don't get with closed-end funds otherwise?
I would say they're getting tactical management. We find a lot of investors here are very sit on their hands and not make changes, not discount rotating or thinking about interest rate decisions and its impact on Some muni funds have lower duration, some has higher, some are the discounts, as you know, evolve and move through time. Some people trade more actively, like myself, even more so for Rob Shaker, and you trade a lot less than Rob and I combined. So, it all depends on what you're looking for. It's a great opportunity to have some active management, but don't forget about the complexity of the wrapper, and the guts aren't as easily analyzed as a more traditional Nuveen, PIMCO, BlackRock traditional muni bond fund.
Yeah, it's important. Like I said, I hear all the time from investors who now are listening. They listen to the Navigator, and they're honing in on closed-end funds, but they're struggling to pull the trigger. This helps them understand why to pull that trigger. John, really interesting. Thanks as always for joining me. We'll see you again soon.
Glad to be here, Chuck.
John Colescott is president of CEF Advisors and the chairman of the Active Investment Company Alliance. Firm is online at cefdata.com, where you can dig into their data for yourself. Now, to learn more about closed-end funds and business development companies, go to aicalliance.org. It's the website for the Active Investment Company Alliance. We're just getting started on Money Life for September 12th. Up next, we're back at FinCon in Portland. Stick around. There's a lot to go. Wadden, he is founder of DriveMatch.com. And one of the things I told you in the setup for this show and setup for all of FinCon has been that we wanted to talk to some of the folks who are doing the fintech stuff, a little bit less about the advisors, a little bit more about fintech. And DriveMatch, it is an interesting site, particularly for me right now, because for the first time in an age, I'm considering what I might have to do if I actually have to change cars. And I've been thinking, well, gee, as little as I drive, maybe I'm the guy who wants to be leasing instead of buying or what have you.
Yes.
And I'm just kind of digging into some of that. And here's DriveMatch, which helps people find pre-negotiated leases. I have to say, while I haven't shopped for a car for a long time, I've spent plenty of time on some of the car websites, et cetera. This is not one that I've spent a lot of time seeing. And so looks kind of interesting to me. It might look interesting to you. DriveMatch.com. Revi Wadden, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about what this does, because I'm not sure I quite said it correctly,
Sure.
but it's pre-negotiated leases, which effectively means that if I found the right car and the right deal, I should be able to get it tomorrow.
Exactly right. Yeah, so depending on how far the car is away from you, depending on whether you need to ship it, depending on how long the paperwork takes, like, your credit application, things like that, yes, you could have your car the same day, but sometimes if you're getting it shipped, it could take 2 to 5 days. I'd say on the higher end, you're looking at about a 5-day maximum if you're maybe getting the car shipped from the East Coast to the West Coast.
And that's part of how it works. And I mean, we should
Yes.
point out, right now, it is not a site where you said, oh, I got my eyes on 4 different types of cars. When I was checking, I only found a few different brands. They're
Yes.
high-end brands, Mercedes. It was Mercedes and BMW.
We've got Hummers, we've got Mazdas right now.
Okay, Mazda's in there, yeah.
Yep.
And GMC I saw in there.
There's
So
some
that would be the
GMCs in there.
Hummers
Yes.
as well. So not everything is there. But again,
Yes.
the site's fairly new, and I'm sure you're going to be adding to it.
Yep.
But a pre-negotiated lease, again, am I going to wind up worrying about things like shipping costs? The edge that people think they can get online,
Yes.
can they maintain that edge if you're dealing with, some shipper who you got to ship it halfway across the country or whatever?
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. So I think what you have to consider is the shipping cost worth it? So I'll give you a really good example. We recently got my aunt NX300 Alexis. And everything in Seattle, in the area where I live, is about $5,000 over MSRP. We were able to source that car from California for about $4,000 under MSRP. This is one of the hottest cars in the market. And so, even when you calculate shipping costs, you're still coming out on top. So we tell people you can cross shop it locally. And a lot of times we oftentimes encourage people to find cars locally. But oftentimes what happens is our customers find that even with shipping costs included, and we charge about $1 a mile roughly, they still come out on top, even with the car getting shipped. And on top of that, they don't have to spend days or hours negotiating with multiple dealers. They have peace of mind that they know they got a good deal because we study the market and we don't post any cars on DriveMatch that haven't kind of gone through our rigorous framework of what we consider a good deal. So I would say anytime you get a car on DriveMatch, you're in the upper 3 to 2% of all deals in the country. So really do save people time, save people money, and give people peace of mind knowing that they got a good deal. And one last thing with the inventory, it really ebbs and flows. Some of our inventory is so high in demand that we post it on the site, and sometimes within 30 minutes to an hour, the car is offline because it's such a good deal.
Well, and sometimes it's one car, one pre-negotiated lease. Sometimes it'll say there's 7 cars available.
Correct.
Does that also mean that, if you've got 7 cars available, and I might be dealing with a couple different dealerships and I might be able to find a better mileage situation based on where I'm shipping to?
Yes, in some cases that is the case. So what we try to do and encourage all of our users to do is go into Drive Match, create a profile, and then you'll see what deals are available to you. We have a little toggle at the top, and it turns on by default. And then you'll see so in Seattle, my zip code is 98101. I turn it on, and I create my profile, and I will only be shown the deals that are available to me. But yes, if there's 7 Mazda CX-90s available, they might be in different locations. But as long as you have the toggle turned on, all of those cars are available to you.
And obviously you can ship anywhere in the country. You're in the Pacific Northwest. The bulk of your deals currently there, and what's the plans on expansion and breaking this out?
Yeah, so we're currently in a major phase of onboarding dealers across the country right now. So right now, I would say the majority of our dealers are in the major metropolitan areas. So we're talking NorCal, like Bay Area, Northern California. We're talking Los Angeles. We're talking Houston, Miami, New York, Chicago, the major DC area. That's kind of where the bulk of our dealers are located right now. But we are going through, we have a next kind of phase of Drive Match coming. We're internally calling it Drive Match 3.0. And with that phase, we're hoping to onboard kind of hundreds of dealers. So we'll have dealers all across the country at every state location.
And the flip side of that, also trying to onboard more brands so that, I'm way too cheap to buy most of the cars that, or lease most of the cars that you guys service, because I also don't drive very much.
Yep.
But, do you expect at some point to be representing dozens of lines?
Well, yes. So I'd say right now online we have about 200. I think the inventory is sitting at about 250 right now. But, middle of last month we were up to about 1,300 cars. And so that really ebbs and flows because it's real-time inventory. So sometimes the dealer is selling the car on their own. But whenever I post the car on Drive Match, or especially if I make an Instagram video about it, these cars, the demand goes through the roof. So we kind of move through that inventory very quick. But we are always trying to get more and more deals added in across different price points. And obviously the lower price points tend to sell a little bit faster.
Let's talk a little bit about how you guys can negotiate a better deal than me. Because I will, if I decide to lease a car, I will go out, do all my research, know what I'm going up against. We'll probably talk to a couple of experts on the show about, making that buy versus lease decision, et cetera.
Yeah.
Why is a pre-negotiated deal better than whatever deal I might be able to get, or at least potentially better?
Yeah, I would say so for us, for me and my partners, we were all kind of hobbyists before we started DriveMatch.com. And we'd go out and try to hack these lease deals and get really, really good lease deals. But, I wouldn't say that we have the best, if you wanted to negotiate and spend hours and hours of your time and days and maybe contacting 10 to 20 different Honda dealerships if you're shopping for a Honda Prologue, for example, you might be able to beat a Drive Match deal. But I would say that the average American consumer very rarely will be able to beat a deal on what's on DriveMatch.com. And that's just because we have a very good sense of the overall industry and what the discounts are on certain cars, because we're in touch with so many dealerships. So we have that scale in terms of what's a good deal and what's a bad deal. We know what the base money factor is. By money factor is what the interest rate is coming directly from the captive bank. So a captive bank, think of GM Financial, Toyota Financial, Honda Financial as the captive banks. We know what the base money factor is that they offer. So there's a buy rate and a sell rate, and we know what that is. And so we will provide it to the customers if they ask for it. So it's fully transparent. And we're just trying to make the buying process very, very simple, very, very easy, because research has shown it's people just don't like shopping for cars. It's not a fun process.
Agreed. I will agree with that. And I haven't really had to shop for one other than one for a child in a long time.
Yes.
So the question that I have to ask every fintech company when they're doing a service like yours, where do you guys get paid?
So we have a drive match fee, which is paid by the customer. Right now, it's sitting at $200, and then the business model is evolving. But eventually, we're going to move. What it's looking like we're going to move into is a where the dealerships are going to be paying to be on the platform. So it'll be like a subscription service for the dealers.
That means that the consumer won't pay for it, maybe not directly in the deal. They may pay for it in terms of what somebody is agreeing to lease a car at.
Sure. Yes. Exactly right. Yep.
Well, like I said, really interesting piece of fintech for somebody who is looking different. And just out of curiosity, it's Drive Match, but do the car sellers, the online car sellers, why aren't they doing pre-negotiated leases the way you are?
That's a really good question, and that's something that I think there's more restrictions for the dealers since when you're selling a Honda, you've got to abide by kind of like Honda compliance. We don't disclose what the dealer is or the VIN number of the car. We just we have the cars listed on our website. You go on and you customize your deal, like the mileage, the term that you want, and your lease, and then we match you with the dealer after the fact.
Ravi, really interesting idea. I'll look forward to seeing how it progresses. Meanwhile, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you for having me.
That's Ravi Wadden. He is founder of DriveMatch.com. If you want to check it out for yourself, that's the place you're going to go, see how it works for you, and see how it works in general. And speaking of what works for you, well, we hope Money Life will keep working for you because we'll be back at FinCon in just a moment. Stick around.
Looking to earn CE credits and hear from top portfolio managers? Go to etftrends.com/webcasts and learn more.
Welcome back to Money Life at FinCon. And I'm joined now by Nick Johnson. He is the founder of everydaymoneyheroes.com. And I told you as we started into FinCon that I was going to be particularly selective this year in talking to some of the money coaches because FinCon has money coaches of all flavors and all styles. But I wanted to talk with Nick because he kind of crosses over a little bit. He does the FIRE side, the financial independence, retire early, and yet he's also a financial literacy advocate. And although those two things go together, they don't always go together well. It's an interesting kind of mix. Now, if you want to learn more about what he's doing, you're going to go to everydaymoneyheroes.com. Nick Johnson, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Chuck. It's my pleasure to be here. Give me the opportunity to go ahead and share the message.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that message, and let's talk a little bit about your journey, because you're here and you're working, but you're a retiree.
I am.
And the message of FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early, I've always said it's a shame that that's the acronym because it's a great acronym, but most people understand it because they think retirement means you're quitting your job and you're never working again.
Right.
Well, you're obviously working because you're here and you're working.
Right.
So I can see that. But, and by the way, I've always said it should be like, I've tried to make it financial independence gaining choice, which would be FIG-C. Nobody likes that.
Doesn't quite roll off the tongue.
I'd like to work out to Fig Newton. I just have never figured out the right acronym.
Right.
But separate from all of that, let's talk about your journey, because retiring early, you're not a particularly old guy, and you retired.
Please tell my kids that, please.
and you retired into this new gig. So a little bit about your journey, please.
Yeah. As far as my journey, Chuck, I have always been extremely intrigued when it comes to money. As a young kid, I remember looking at the business section and seeing the stock tickers there and what it meant. So I was always intrigued with it. And so really I did what I thought I was supposed to do as far as living below my means, and saving my money. And that's what I was taught as a kid. But there was a piece that I didn't quite understand. That was the investment aspect of it. I was like, you can't save yourself to retirement. And so what happens is that I went and I continued on and I tried to expand my knowledge and my understanding. And so what I did in understanding those things was that, okay, I want to be able to no longer have to exchange my time for money. And when we talk about FIRE, that's ultimately what it is. And so I never had an extremely lucrative job. I was a computer programmer, but I was a computer programmer in Florida. So we weren't making Silicon Valley money. But I was very deliberate in what I did. So I went ahead and I just continued to live below my means and invest that money. And what I want to do is just really show individuals that, you know what, it's okay that you don't have a really high income. You can still go ahead and achieve the financial independence piece of FIRE. The RE is okay, But what we really want to do is focus on that financial independence. And so what I'm doing right now in this kind of second phase of my life is that I'm going out. I really want to be a financial literacy advocate. Everyone talks about generational wealth and how it's really great. Well, if you achieve generational wealth, first of all, you want to keep it, but also we have to have financial literacy to ultimately be able to achieve that. So that's really what I'm doing right now. Along with my platform of creating content for individuals to really understand some of the fundamentals and provide inspiration with kind of sharing the stories of others. I also do workshops in my community. So I go out once a quarter, I bring people in from the FIRE community, and literally we have these kind of AMAs where you can ask us any questions about how do we achieve financial independence? How do we get there? You'll figure out that most of us is really similar to, the millionaire next door. We just really worked. We were diligent in what our spending, and we just kind of let compounding work for us.
Well, and that's important because FIRE has different flavors.
It does.
And there are the sort of radical extremes of FIRE. And for me, and that's where, by the way, folks, that's where like you're house hacking and you're living in a lousy thing because that way you can have somebody else pay your rent because they're on the other side of the duplex. You fix that up first. You're living in squalor until you can get that done, or you're, spending virtually nothing and what have you. But it doesn't have to be that way. So when you're talking with people about FIRE, how much do they gravitate towards the, let's go cold turkey on spending, let's try to become radical, versus the other? And when they say, I want coast FIRE, I want to do something that's going to help me, have choice in my life, how often do they go, okay, and I just wound up back in the same place?
Okay. Well, I think FIRE is almost like a diet. It's like if you try to go too hardcore, too quick, it's not sustainable. So it's important just to understand where you are in your journey as far as understanding, what resonates with you. There are some individuals who might figure out later in life that, I wish I could have made some different decisions and I want to be in a different place. So some people feel like, I really need to get hardcore right now and just really go at it. And the luxury is for younger people who have that time in which they can go ahead and they can continue to allow that interest to compound for them. They can go ahead and they don't have to go so hardcore. So really it depends on where you are in your journey, but ultimately understanding that no matter what you do, whenever you start to just implement some healthy habits, you're going to find yourself in a far better situation if you had not.
So let's talk about what makes an everyday money hero, because I know that there are people in my audience who would qualify, but that's the last thing they would ever think of themselves as. So here you are running everydaymoneyheroes.com. And I don't know that you would use the hero adjective to describe yourself, but your journey is heroic for your family. Building generational wealth de facto makes you one. But how do you define an everyday money hero? And do you have a favorite everyday money hero story or idol?
Oh, wow. Well, Chuck, they say that not all heroes wear capes, right? And so I would have to say that applies to an everyday money hero. There's someone who's willing to kind of go counter culture as far as, they understand that, I'm not going to get caught up in being loyal to particular brands. I'm going to stay the course. I know that, ultimately at the end of the day, I want to get to a point where I no longer have to exchange my time for money. So I'm going to go ahead and make those sacrifices now so that later on I can reap those rewards. And so I think that's extremely important that, even though an individual may not think that they're an everyday money hero, they really are. If they really sit up and they're being wise stewards of their resources, whether it be, their real estate, their income, anything that they have, they're just being wise stewards of it. It's really focusing on the ultimate end game, because my thing is that I want to give people with the belief that they can have ownership of time. And that's really what I want to do. As far as my favorite kind of everyday money hero story is anybody when I have the opportunity to meet them in any setting and I explain to them, hey, you know what? You don't have to wait till 65 years old to be considered retired. Because at the end of the day, there are people who are 65 who are still working. So it's not the beauty of hitting that number. It's the beauty of hitting that number that you need to be able to live off your investment. So once that kind of light gets triggered in their head, that saying, hey, you know what? Literally, if I can figure out, how much I need to live and then, multiply that times say 25, that kind of gives me a good rule of thumb that, hey, if I can have this much investable income, I can possibly just go ahead and have the ownership of time. So that's really my thing. Anyone that I can just kind of expose the concept to and the light bulb goes off, it makes me happy.
And that ownership of time concept, super important, but it's not what most people think of. I mean, you very clearly value time the same way you value money. They are not the same commodity, but they have the same amount of value to you.
Yeah, it is true. the way I like to think about money is just a tool to buy back our time. And that's really what it is. So as we go and we think about what we can do and how we can do it, we really want to be able to move forward and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to work today for the future and just not get caught up with today. So we have to be forward thinking. That's the biggest thing we want to think about. Because the goal is that, once we get to a point in our life where we have the choice to work and not have to work. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we want. We don't want to have to work. We want to work if we want to. And so what I'm doing right now is that I'm doing this because I want to, not because I have to, because I want to go ahead and just kind of spread the good news.
Nick, I admire you. You may not be everybody's version of a hero, but you are an everyday money hero, and that's not just because you run the website. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me on Money Life.
Thank you so much, Chuck. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you so much for the chance to go ahead and continue to share my message.
Nick Johnson is the founder of Everyday Money Heroes. Just add the .com to it if you want to find them for more information. And, well, you'd be a hero in the eyes of those of us who run Money Life if you would stick around, because we've got a lot more to go from FinCon in Portland. And we'll be back with some of that right after this message.
Exchange is more than a finance conference. It's a community. The insights, connections, and strategies you'll gain will last long after the event ends. Join us for the most valuable few days of your year. Exchange 2026, March 15th through the 18th in Las Vegas. Visit exchangeetf.com to register now.
We're back at FinCon in Portland, Oregon, FinCon 25, and someone who I've talked with her every time I've come to FinCon, but we've had her on the show several times since coming to FinCon, is Gwen Mers Joyner. She is the original Fiery Millennial. She is the person who runs the Fiery Millennials blog, which you can find at fierymillennials.com. She and her husband, Tim, do the Fire Takes podcast, which you can find at firetakespod.com. And she is, for my money, one of the most interesting people who is here and in personal finance. And I'll explain why in a minute. But first, Gwen, it's always great to chat with you.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. Likewise.
So the reason that I love talking with you is because as a young millennial, in your age range, you are at a spot where you're experiencing everything financially. You came to money early in your life in terms of coming to a mindset that you wanted to control it, not coming into money or that sort of thing.
I wish I had come into money at an early age. That would have solved so many of my problems.
Yeah, but you came to I need to have a money mindset and take control of my money early. And you started off into the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And you were what would have been considered hardcore FIRE. You were, let me live the house hack, let me do all these other sorts of things. And you were kind of the poster child for that. You were the young, fiery millennial.
Yeah.
And then you got there and you said, not much there.
Well, actually, this is probably not what I want to do as a sustainable future long-term plan.
So you're now at a spot much happier, much better, married and all those other sorts of things. And as you have put it, that behavior has set you up for the rest of your life.
Yep.
So let's start with where you are now and where do you fit in the FIRE movement? Because people who succeeded but then said, yeah, it's not for me, are not the role models.
Yeah, no, I'm a terrible role model for so many different reasons nowadays, but I'm also probably an actually pretty decent role model as well for a lot of different reasons. But I think right now I'm probably in post-FI stage, where we have saved so much front-loaded that we don't need to save anymore, and we can just kind of live our lives without worrying about money and saving up for retirement because we already have enough once compound interest hits. But we might actually be rapidly approaching regular, real retire early money, net worths wise. So there's actually the possibility that I might just actually quit work sooner than I think would be possible. So ironically, I think I might actually achieve my goal of retiring at 35 that I set out to do at 22.
And for my audience, how close are you to 35?
I turned 35 in a month.
But are you planning to retire? Because everything I know about you says you also, in all of this, found a job that you love, working with people who you really like working with. So having the ability to do it is not the same as doing it. Are you going to bail?
Well, maybe, and we're still trying to figure that out. It's, we have plenty of future money, but do I specifically have enough short-term, easy, accessible money to smooth out that trajectory long-term in order to, be fine until we can get to 59 and a half and get into all those money that's been saved away by our future or by our past selves. So I really enjoy my job. I find it very fascinating. I like the people that I work with a lot. And I think it provides great value to our economy and to our community. But I have to go back into the office 5 days a week, Chuck. 5 days a week. Can you imagine how horrible that must be after being home for the pandemic? I'm being very facetious because so many people have to be in the office 5 days a week. Oh, poor millennial having to be in the office. But, it's a big change, and it does take up a bigger portion of my life than I want to. And the way that our time is calculated, there's either 100% employment at my work or there's 0% employment. And there's no sliding scale in between.
And by the way, I think we're allowed to say where you work. Glenn is employed by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis.
Yep.
And so if you're wondering, and it makes sense that the Fed would be on a schedule that says you got to be back in the office. We're not faulting them for what they're doing. It makes sense for them to say it's all or nothing, but that may not make sense for you. So then the question becomes, how does someone at your age, so you're not facing the ageism that somebody my age going on might want a new career now would face and all that sort of stuff. You're young enough to get the jobs. You are wealthy enough to say, I can value my time in a way that says you can't have me either full-time or in the office full-time, etc. How do you then go about trying to set yourself up? Is it find the right side hustle or something else?
Do you like the shirt that I'm wearing?
It's a lovely green, but
it's a nice button-up shirt, right? I made it. I made this. I have been learning how to sew clothing, and it's something that really interests me. And clothing doesn't pay a whole lot of money, but it's something that I find a lot of joy in, and maybe I incorporate that into my future plans. I have so many other things that I want to do that I don't have time to work, and I don't maybe need to work. So maybe I can just take some time off and do what I want, and we have enough to get by, especially now that I have the privilege of having a husband who has a well-paying, stable job that he really enjoys and doesn't want to leave. And we have a stepdaughter who just started high school, so we have 4 more years in our current location. So, I'm not going to go road trip around the world for any length of time, maybe a couple weeks, but I also could use some of my skills that I've picked up in my current role and maybe do some consulting work to kind of pad up those accounts, or whenever I get low, maybe I can just take on some of that work. So we're having these conversations, and it's still evolving.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I did want to talk with you, is that you've got all these various things going. I did not know, by the grace of Betsy Ross, that you would become a seamstress in all of this. It's just
the threads that we weave in our stories.
Yeah, somehow I had missed that one, but it does bring out something else, because what I always told my kids when I was trying to teach them about money, and my oldest is about the same age as you, was that money was about choices. That don't think about money in terms of what it buys, but that money is about choices. While you can look back and talk about the choices you made being hard on you, and maybe regretting some of them, the flip side is that you now can say, in the words of A League of Their Own, that the hard is what makes it good, and look at the choices you have now.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, hey, cowgirls, see the grass? Don't eat it, which is my favorite line from A League of Their Own.
No, I'm going to go more towards...
choices, but choices are good, right? The choices that we make in the future and that we make right now are relevant and impactful in the future. And so are you going to make the hard choices now? Are you going to make the slightly less hard choices now and make slightly more difficult choices later? I mean, it's up to you. What do you want to do?
But the other side is, is the talk for you now? You know, what I've always said is that the FIRE movement, I kind of dislike that it's FIRE because financial independence, retire early, and you get Susie Orman talking about you'll never have enough money, or if you do, or whatever.
Yeah, no, we're not going to run out of money. We're going to have plenty of money. I'm not worried about that at all.
But it's that whole retire early, when I've always said it should be, financial independence, gaining choice.
Yes.
Though that's FIGC is a terrible acronym.
Yes, yeah, and I have all of the choices that I could make, and the world is basically my oysters, if I liked oysters, which I don't.
Well, you're probably saving some money there. Living where I do, you can get oysters where I am. You just can't get them cheaply. So here's the thing. As you said, the FIRE movement can love you or kind of hate you, but it would seem like you are the role model for this is how it turns out. And oh, by the way, if you hate how it's turning out, it's still better than the alternative. Because I'm sure, what do you say to your friends who are your age? They didn't do what you did. They're in their 30s. And they're in the struggle, and they don't have those choices because they know you don't want to say, ha ha, I told you so. So what do you say to them?
How can I help you get to where I'm at as quickly as possible? How can I help you change your situation and give you that freedom of choice?
Can someone do that, relatively speaking, at any age? And can they do it without going through the hell that you put yourself through? Or is the hell, again, the heart is what makes it good, is the hell what they are going to have to do if they want to get off their path, the traditional path, and be able to do the retire early, have the choice thing?
I think it does require some level of sacrifice. I mean, I think you can do whatever you want to do, but after a certain point, getting out of the situation that you put yourself in, whether or not you own a house or you live in a certain school district or something, you can change whatever you want, but it is going to require a certain level of effort and sacrifice to accomplish. And I think the more established that you get, the more difficult it gets to make those drastic level changes.
Yeah, as somebody who doesn't necessarily expect to retire ever, but who has opportunities, I can see it. And in fact, I had a discussion recently with Jillian Johnsrud about her book, Retiring
amazing. Often.
For you, is Retire Often now the blueprint?
I think so, yeah. This will be a mini retirement, but the thing is that I'm not retiring from work. I'm still going to be doing work. It's just work that I enjoy on my terms, that I want to do, that I find interesting. And it might not be paid work. It might just be making myself more clothing.
That's Gwen Mers Joyner. FieryMillennial.com for as long as she feels like running it. Current employee of the Federal Reserve.
Who is not speaking for the Federal Reserve, by the way.
Not speaking for the Federal Reserve. And if she was, well, that would hasten the fact that she may or may not be working for them in the near future. Seamstress, and also on the Fire Takes pod with her husband, Tim. Worth checking out. Gwen, always great to see you.
Thanks, Chuck. You too.
We'll be back with more of today's edition of Money Life at FinCon right after this message.
Did you know that global generalizable robotics represent a $24 trillion investment opportunity? Top robotics and AI companies are actively reshaping industries across sectors. Learn more about capturing this investment opportunity at Vetify.com.
Welcome back to Money Life at FinCon. One of the things I promised you was that we would be talking with a number of the folks who do fintech things, that we wouldn't be all financial coaches. And we've got a really interesting one, especially I think for the Money Life audience, because so many of you are self-directed investors. My guest right now is Adam Bergman. He is a tax attorney who in 2010, so we're talking fintech, you guys all think new. This has been around for a while. In 2010, he started IRA Financial, which you can learn about at irafinancial.com. And what you need to know quickly as we get into this conversation is that where they specialize is not just self-directed IRAs, but self-directed IRAs that are looking at a lot of the alternative assets and some of the things that at least until recently, you couldn't easily get in a lot of plans. They've got more than 25,000 account holders. Again, they've been around since 2010, but we're introducing them to Money Life today. IRAFinancial.com. Adam Bergman, thanks for joining me.
Chuck, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you've been doing the alternatives in IRAs and retirement accounts for a while, but we just saw a big law change that is going to make crypto and other alternative assets. Everybody's focused on crypto, but to me, private credit and private equity is much more interesting and much more appropriate. And there's been a lot of consternation about this, about like, do investors really need crypto in there? Well, for you, since you've already been doing this, how big a change is the law change, and how much is it not what we keep hearing so many people in the media making it out to be?
Okay, so it's a great question. Let me just start with kind of some historical context. So I was a tax lawyer in New York City for 8 years at large law firms. Never heard of a self-directed IRA. I always thought your IRA or 401k had to be invested in stocks. And then I had a client who wanted to use his IRA to invest in his hedge fund. And I got tasked to do the research. And I found out very quickly that when IRAs were created in 1974 by ERISA, there was no distinction between IRAs that invested in stocks and IRAs that invested in alternative assets like real estate. The only difference is the large brokerage firms don't make money when their clients buy alternative assets, non-publicly traded securities. So they essentially limited retirement plans to owning publicly traded securities, equities, fixed income. So when I started this company in 2010, I remember my colleagues thought I was crazy. They said, Adam, no one's going to buy alternative assets in an IRA. Are you nuts? Like, what are you doing? I said, no, there's a reason the IRS, there's a reason Congress wanted to provide people diversification options. If they didn't want people to invest in alts, they would have just simply limited the law under Section 408 and 4975. But they didn't. They allow for alternatives. So I just knew there was a market because it really excited me. And ultimately, I told my friends, listen, when you look at the Forbes 500 list, who's on there? It's people that are in the alt space, whether they're private businesses, publicly traded businesses, they own assets, they own real estate, they own private equity hedge funds and the like. So to me, offering people to invest in those assets through a tax efficient vehicle was, my passion.
But you were doing it before we had what now seems to be sort of permission.
Yeah.
So it's been allowed the whole time. The change now, how much of it is about making it more accessible or making it easier? How much of it is a real change?
Yeah, so it's a real change in the 401k world. In the IRA world, since 1974, ERISA created IRAs and 401ks. So before 1974, the only people that were able to save were people that worked at large companies like IBM that had defined benefit plans. So in the IRA world, alternative assets were allowed. Since it's an individual retirement account, you don't have to worry about fiduciary ERISA rules. You're in control of your own IRA. So alternative assets, a lot easier to foster and grow in the IRA world. However, in the 401k world, where you have a company and you have a trustee, who's, let's say, the business owner, who needs to be a fiduciary and act in the best interest of its employees, it is a lot more difficult to have and offer alternative assets. Couple that with the fact that you have very aggressive attorneys that are always looking to litigate businesses over fees and investment decisions. So the executive order by President Trump in 2025 was groundbreaking because it basically said, okay, this is something, alternative assets are allowed. We're going to enforce the fact that it's a permissible asset, and we're going to protect businesses from offering these alternative asset investment options from litigation risk and also from SEC risk.
I've got two questions. I'm trying to figure out the right order for them because, again, I said there's been plenty of criticism about, do you need it? And no, nobody needs to do alternative assets. You can reach your financial goals without them. But how much is the next big change going to be when, because of this rule change, you wind up with some big fund company that provides life cycle funds, target date funds, and they say, you know what, we're going to put a 1.5% allocation to Bitcoin in there or something along those lines. Because for all the people who say, oh, you don't need it and you don't have to do it, well, you might at some point be getting it just by doing your target date fund. So how much of the world is going to change just by the fact that at some point the big players are likely to put it into their asset allocation funds?
Chuck, it's changed already. If you look at Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, he just came out and said recently that he feels that Americans should have 20 to 30% of their portfolio in alternative assets. Look at Jamie Dimon, who basically, 5 years ago said no one should touch Bitcoin. And now he's offering and allowing his investors and clients to invest in cryptos in the JP Morgan platform. So it's all changed. Alternative assets is a very, very important aspect of anyone's portfolio, especially in the retirement world. Why? Because when you look at an IRA, it's a long-term investment vehicle. It's something that you should have for 20, 30, 40 years. And if you look at alternative assets like private equity or private businesses, hedge funds, those are long-term investment cycles, 5 to 15 years. So it's a perfect marriage to couple the ability to use your IRA in a tax-efficient manner and invest in alternative assets. It has a very, very huge potential for large tax-free returns.
What, you just mentioned Larry Fink saying 20% of assets in alternatives, et cetera. Folks who would have been seeking out IRA financial very much might have been looking at other sorts of, I want to be able to get them. This is a great way to do it and an easier way to do it. So for your average clientele, what percentage are they putting in alternative assets? I don't want my audience to get the picture that like, this is a company that you only turn to when you're looking for alternatives, because that's not the case. But if there may be more alternative interested, I know you can't give us an average asset allocation, but.
So it's interesting. Right now, IRA Financial, all we do is alt. So when a client comes to us, they're taking a percentage of their retirement, generally 20 to 40%, and they're doing alternative assets. And when I say alternative asset, that means an asset that is not publicly traded. So not a publicly traded stock, not Apple. So it's a private business, it's private equity, hedge funds, real estate, credit funds, gold, cryptos. So we are having clients that go to their advisors and say, hey, I want to buy gold, or I want to invest in my friend's business, I want to buy the house next door. And their advisor on the Fidelity, Schwab, or JP Morgan platform saying, sorry, I can't let you do that. We don't allow you to do it. And then they go online and they find IRA Financial, who allows you to do it very tax efficiently, quickly, and very cost effectively. And they'll move tax-free some of their money to the IRA Financial platform, and we'll unlock their funds so they can make their alternative asset investment. We handle all the IRS reporting, all the boring administration, so that they can focus what they do best and on making the investment.
How much are we watching things change so dramatically that, your investors are coming back to you and going, okay, wait, I started by wanting Bitcoin. Now I want Ethereum. Now I want the next thing and whatever. And how much are they doing it with individual items as opposed to saying, well, now I can go get Bitcoin funds and do this in other ways?
Yeah. So if you focus on double click on cryptos, my clients actually own the coin. So if you own an ETF, you own shares in a fund. You don't actually own the Bitcoin or the Ethereum. With IRA Financial and our partnership with Bitstamp, which was just acquired by Robinhood, you can actually own the coins. And just to tackle the crypto subject, the best investment I ever made is I bought Bitcoin in 2015. And my advisors told me, don't do it, you're crazy, you're stupid. I took a little bit of money and I invested in Bitcoin. And by far, it's the best thing I ever did in my life, other than marrying my wife and having 2 kids. So if you marry the ability to have long-term gains in a tax-free account, and the way I looked at it, I said, okay, if Bitcoin drops 80% or goes to zero, my life will go on. I can still saving. But if it doubles or triples or 10x or 20x, which it did, it's all going to be tax-free. And I did in a Roth IRA. So long as I'm 59 and a half, and the Roth's been open at least 5 years, when I pull that money out, it's going to be tax-free. So the idea with alternative assets is you can make bets on assets that have big alpha, big potential built-in gains. And if you're going to take that risk and do that equation, do it in a tax-efficient account like a self-directed account.
It's the way folks want to be doing it in terms of trying to figure out how it all works. Again, it's not something necessarily every investor has figured out for themselves. That's why you might be turning to IRA Financial. One last quick question. I ask this about every fintech company, which is, where do you make your money in the process? How does IRA Financial get paid?
Yeah, so we are on our client side. We do not sell product. We're totally neutral and agnostic. If our clients buy real estate or cryptos or gold, we don't care. We want them to do well and prosper. We have flat administration fees. So everyone pays the same amount. If you have 50K or 50 million, we give everyone the best service, and we are on the same team as our clients. So unlike a financial advisor that will charge a 1% asset management fee, so as your assets go up in value, they make more money, we take the opposite approach. We want you to keep your gains, and you're going to pay us the same flat fee, which is basically under $500. You can set this up and have total control over your retirement future.
Well, Adam, really interesting. I appreciate you taking the time out to join me. Thanks so much for coming on to Money Life.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
That's Adam Bergman. He is the founder of IRA Financial. You can go to irafinancial.com for more information. And you can stick around because there's much more to come on this edition of Money Life at FinCon. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Exchange is more than a finance conference. It's a community. Join us to gain insights and connections that last. Visit exchangeetf.com.
We're back to wrap this one up. I hope you've enjoyed Money Life at FinCon so far. We've got one more show, that one coming on Monday, when our guests will include Joe Saul Seahigh from the Stacking Benjamins podcast, Paula Pant from Afford Anything, Kanwal Sarai from Simply Dividends, a podcast that is all about dividend investing and much more. But then we're back to the regularly scheduled kind of stuff that we do, which will next week include Adam Rosenzweig from Gehring & Rosenzweig talking commodities, John Blank, Chief Investment Strategist at Zacks Investment Research, John Dorfman from Dorfman Value Investments talking value stocks in the market call, Scott Bennett from Invest with Rules, Jeff DeMasso, editor of the Independent Vanguard Advisor, talking Vanguard funds and ETFs in the market call, and more. So we've got big things planned, and I hope you will be part of it. Meanwhile, if you are looking for something to celebrate, it's National Day of Encouragement. Then I could also encourage people with a hug and a high five because it's National Hug and High Five Day. It is National Report Medicare Fraud Day. The truth is, anytime you see it, anytime you think you see it, yes, report it. Do the right thing. The fact is, plenty of people don't recognize when it's happening or don't think maybe this crosses the line. If you think it remotely crosses the line, do what you can to report it. And by the way, it's also National Video Games Day. So if you like video games, indulge. On the food front, National Chocolate Milkshake Day. Yeah, I'll be traveling today. I don't know that I'll get one, but if I can, sure. My guests today were John Cole Scott, president of CEFadvisors.com, chairman of the Active Investment Company Alliance, CEFdata.com for the firm, and you can dig into their data, AICalliance.org for the Active Investment Company Alliance. Then from FinCon, Revi Wadden from DriveMatch.com, Nick Johnson from EverydayMoneyHeroes.com, Gwen Mers Joyner, who runs the Fiery Millennials blog, which you'll find at FieryMillennials.com, and also does the Fire Takes Pod with her husband, Tim Joyner. You can find that at FireTakesPod.com. And then Adam Bergman, founder of IRA Financial, online at IRAFinancial.com. Thanks to them and thanks to Rob Floyd, my producer, but mostly thanks to you for being here, because you make this special and worthwhile for me each and every day. The Money Life quote of the day comes from Nick Johnson from EverydayHeroes.com. He said it in today's interview, and it goes like this: money is just a tool to buy back our time. Yeah, we call it Money Life because we want you to live the right life, and that involves having money and life and time in the right perspective. And one of the way to do that is to remember, until we do this again the next time, the best thing you could do for your money is not worry too much about it. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe and calm. We'll see you here again on Money Life on Monday.
The people who appear on Money Life are here for your and their own entertainment. Don't take advice from us or any other podcast without doing more research and/or consulting your financial advisor. We believe our guests provide reliable information, but we can't and don't guarantee the accuracy or completeness of their statements. Opinions expressed on Money Life are those of the host and guests only and reflect their personal thinking. They're not representative policy or strategy of any employers or sponsors. This show is produced by Money Life Radio, which retains all rights to the content. If you want to use any part of this show for your own purposes, be they good or evil, you must get our written permission first. And remember, with great financial information comes great responsibility. Please act responsibly.
I need to get out of here before someone else comes to stop me.